Hey everyone, it's your girl Maddie here, aka Beaver Mosh, here today to talk to you about Folium Limina from the Salt Lake City, Utah-based band The Otolith. This coming off of Blues Funeral Recordings. Now, The Otolith features 4 members from the band that was known as Sub Rosa. The only Sub Rosa member that didn't move on to this new project was their vocalist, Rebecca Vernon. I was somebody who enjoyed Sub Rosa's music quite a bit. I appreciated their very cinematic and atmospheric approach to doom metal. If you are unfamiliar with Sub Rosa and haven't heard their album More Constant Than the Gods, I would definitely recommend giving it a go. It's a fantastic listen. The members of Sub Rosa who did go on to form this new band, The Otolith, they really continue and build off of the unique sound that Sub Rosa had, while still giving this new band its own identity. The Otolith really sets the tone with the 13-minute opening track, Sing No Coda. They make it known right off the bat that they are going to take their time and they are going to let these tracks develop as much as they think it needs to. You, from the beginning, are introduced to these very chamber-esque violins, and the violin is an instrument that's used heavily, not just on this first track, but on Folium Limina as a whole, and it's used in very interesting ways. Also in the beginning, you get this kind of broken and decaying tape hiss that fades as more elements are brought in. We're introduced towards the beginning of this track to these very elegant choral vocals. It takes a good 3 minutes for any metal elements really at all to kick in, but when they do, you definitely feel it. These doom metal riffs that kind of come out of nowhere. They're glacial and they're huge. I mean, these things pulverize. But at the same time, the symphonic elements that we've already had remain very present, and it creates this very interesting contrast. I think if a band was less careful in how they combined this, it wouldn't sound as good as it does here. The percussion also makes some really interesting choices. I'm pretty sure that's a cowbell that's used pretty prominently, and it works. It works really well. You get these somber yet grand melodic bits that intertwine with the overall heaviness of this. There's a real film score-esque build to this track and really the album in general. I'll admit, I had to stop jotting things down halfway through listening to this first track because I noticed that my notes were getting way too out of hand. There's just so much detail to digest here, and that is in no way a bad thing. Now on the next track, Andromeda's Wing, all of a sudden, kind of really without warning, the heaviness knob is turned up like 5 levels at least. Before, up to this point, we had only known these from the Otolith these very melancholic but cleanly sung vocals. And now we're surprised with these arresting death growls. And they're ferocious and add a lot of texture. The violins here, still prominently here, do a more kind of choppy, muted passage. The instrument is used more in a percussive manner here. It's really cool. I love the midsection on this track. Everything kind of quiets down and the guitars come in with a more soft, muted, clean groove, and other elements gradually creep in. The tempo slowly increases until we are finally hit with this, seismic, dystopia-inducing riff and more aggressive death growls. It's an excellent use of a crescendo. Another thing a lot of bands try but can sometimes really mess up. Otolith does not mess it up here. The next song, Ekprotic, I believe it's pronounced, you get this interesting cocktail and recipe of these different elements. So you have these dark, ceremonious guitars and these haunting sung vocals with as well these creeping symphonic passages. And it all kind of introduces these doomy riffs that seem to come out of the murkiest of depths. On Hubris, you get more cleanly performed guitars that mesh with these really enchanting violins that seem to be recorded in these overlapping layers that work to create this gorgeous and engrossing atmosphere for the listener. And the drums come in really hot in the mix here with these sharp, loud snare hits. The drums add a lot of, I would say, drama to this track. When the heavy, distorted guitars do come in, and they come in kind of as a surprise, you're already so lost in everything else that these riffs just kind of fully now knock you into a daze. Bone Dust, I think, is going to be the most memorable. It's definitely going to be a standout track for a lot of people. And for a very unique reason. The song samples an iconic speech from the well-known Charlie Chaplin film, The Great Dictator. And the speech is played over these very propulsive, fast guitars. It's a moment. And how the speech is used and where it's used, timing wise, and kind of the backdrop that it's given, it's used very strategically. It plays on contradictions it kind of plays like you would expect a beloved film to play in how this speech comes in. Where previously and afterwards too, for the majority of it, this album is very bleak and gloomy. It's doom metal, for crying out loud, obviously. But this speech interjects a bit of hopefulness into it, especially when Chaplin proclaims the hate of men will pass, dictators will die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. It gives me goosebumps every time. As I've said with other things that this band tries, I don't think it would work if other bands didn't incorporate this with such strategy and care. But they pull it off. The Otolith pull this off very well. Dispirit, it kind of degrades as the track goes on until you reach this. It becomes this sort of piano-led lullaby that kind of fades into more of that tape hiss I talked about on the opening track. That tape hiss is an interesting way for the band to kind of bookend this album. And that way I think Dispirit is I feel, a proper way to close this thing out. The Otolith very exceptionally demonstrates this loud and quiet contrasting technique. They use a lot of more softer passages in a way to when the heavier, loud sections do hit, they take you by surprise and their effectiveness is amplified. This is a very emotionally dense record. It's bleak, yet elegant and enchanting. It's haunting yet majestic, I would say. It's often heavy as all hell, but at the same time it can be stunningly beautiful. The Otolith just uses dynamics and atmosphere so well, and with so much attention to detail. The symphonic elements are a huge kind of defining characteristic of this record, and they're used so well. They could have really dove too deep into the symphonic elements and overdid it, but they don't. This is still very much a metal album, a heavy, heavy doom metal album. If you're someone who is a fan of doom metal or gothic metal, or have an affinity for symphonic music and are curious to hear it used in a context such as this one, then I definitely recommend giving this album a listen. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed this review and found it helpful, consider giving it a like. If you want to hear more of my reviews and be notified of when they come, and you'd be so kind, hit the subscribe button. Leave a comment below if you listened to it and would like to tell me what you thought. Or if you have any feedback for me, I love hearing that. You You can follow me on Twitter. There's a Twitter link in the bio of this channel. Keep it metal. My name is Maddie, aka Beaver Mosh. Signing off.